Hi, we're just waiting for people to come in. Come on in. We're waiting for more. Wait a few more seconds for people to come in. Okay. So, hello everyone, and welcome to today's LLC Brown Bag webinar lecture series. I'm Jane Adler, the lecture organizer and your host. So thank you for being here today. And just to remind you, if a question comes to mind, just put it right down in the Q&A button, and so you won't forget it, and we'll answer it at the end of the talk. And we try to answer as many questions as possible. So if we don't get to yours, I apologize. And if you'd like to be on our lecture mailing list and you want to keep seeing what we're doing, or you want to know more about our collaborative learning classes, just get in touch with the office. So, many of us at one time or another, we have a relationship that's so great, and then all of a sudden, it starts to become strained, and we may say to ourselves, what just happened? And what can I do about it? So today I am very excited to introduce our guests, Linda Bloom and Charlie Bloom. And they're going to talk about some of these unwanted situations. And let me show you here. They are the author of this book and other books. This one is An End to Arguing. And they actually, as I said, they've written 5 books. And one of them, there was a bestseller, What I Wish I Knew Before I Got Married, or something. You'll correct me if I didn't get that right. I should have written it down in my memory. Okay, so Linda and Charlie Bloom, they're both trained psychotherapists and relationships counselors. And Linda did her undergraduate work at Boston University, and she went to graduate school for her master's in social work at Boston College. Charlie Bloom did his undergraduate work at Northeastern University and obtained his master's in social work at Boston University. And they have they've worked with individuals and couples and groups and organizations since 1975. And they have lectured and they've taught at learning institutes throughout the United States and internationally, including the Esalen Institute, the Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health, and the East Bay Mindfulness Institute. And as I said, they've authored the 5 books, and they have been married since 1972 and have been in a psychotherapy private practice in California since 1986, and they specialize in treating couples. So Linda and Charlie, welcome to the LLC Brown Bag Lecture. I'm thrilled to have you here.
And thank you for inviting us, Jane. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Me too. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you. You're welcome.
So
you may, we're all anxious to hear your presentation.
Well, we're speaking about having great relationships. While we're in them, we might as well go for the gold. It's my attitude, and get the most out of them and give the most to them and thrive in them.
I'm willing to settle for the silver.
So I'm willing to reach high, and I don't really feel that there's going to be any fabulous relationship brought to me on a tray. I'm willing to take responsibility for learning the skills that give rise to a great relationship, like terrific conflict management skills, great communication skills, good negotiation skills, good repair skills, and also to develop the qualities in myself that will enable me to be eligible for a great relationship, like patience and persistence and commitment and courage to bring up the tough subjects. These are all qualities that will give rise to a wonderful relationship. And I'm not just talking about romantic partnership. I'm talking about a relationship with our kids, our relationship with our grandkids, our relationship with people in the workplace or our neighbors or our extended family. And so one key skill is to be able to handle differences really well. And I'm willing to confess that who you're looking at right now is a couple of recovered hotheads. That in the old days, when we were first together, we were both firstborn and we were, interested in getting our way, and we were not skillful. But a signature strength of both of ours is that we're hungry learners and we're lifelong learners, like your clan there. And so we paid attention, we got good help, we read books, we attended workshops, we got people to coach us who were in the graduating classes ahead of us, and we learned a lot. So one of the courses that we teach is from conflict to connection. And then I saved all of those gorgeous course notes and we formed them into the book, An End to Arguing. And so this is key, to be able to not be avoidant about leaning into the challenge of handling our differences. And also, when it gets overheated, how to settle ourselves down and soothe ourselves, maybe take a few breaths, maybe we need longer than that, and then come back when we're more graceful and dignified to be able to learn and understand more deeply each other's point of view with respect. Yeah, and so that's one of the keys.
My turn?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I know that in the title of your this talk, Jane, said something about secrets of great relationships. And I was looking at that little insignia at the bottom of the screen earlier, and it said lifelong learning collaborative. I'm pretty sure that's what it said. And that kind of sums it up right there. I think that's just such a perfect characterization of one of the secrets, or maybe more than one, of having truly fulfilling relationships. And which means that since relationships seem to be, according to the quote experts, the primary factor in influencing your quality of life, it seems to me that lifelong learning collaboration that's the essence of what successful relationships are about. It's about a lifelong commitment to personal development, so that you haven't decided that your education ended when you left high school or got your college degree or whenever, which, there's a surprising number of people who have never read another book since they completed their formal education.
It's a shame.
I don't remember exactly what the statistic is, but I was horrified. So so many people, so many of us don't realize that life is about learning.
Mhm.
And it doesn't stop because you cease to attend a formal education institution. And so that curiosity about personal development, about learning, about becoming a more intelligent, capable human being, that's a huge factor in terms of determining where your relationship can go. If you're a lifelong learner, then, and you have a partner who's a lifelong learner, then you will experience a totally different kind of relationship than a person or a couple who doesn't share that vision, who doesn't share that value. You know, one of my favorite singers and songwriters is a guy named Bob Dylan. I don't know if anybody here has heard of him. You know, maybe some of us old folks have heard of him. You know, if you haven't, then you might want to check out some of his music. But there's a line in one of his songs, and it's very simple, and it goes like this: "He who isn't busy being born is busy dying. He who isn't busy being born is busy dying." So what Dylan is saying is that if you're not developing yourself, if you're not moving in a way in your life that is bringing you more experience, that is opening you up more, is helping you to become more aware of your consciousness, your presence, your possibilities. If you're not moving in that direction, then you're going backwards. There's no fence to sit on that allows you just to stay where you are. Because if you're not moving forward, you're sliding back.
Mhm.
So, you know, I guess if there's one point that I would want to leave people with here, and, you know, we're going to make a lot of other points shortly, it's that commitment to lifelong learning, which is one of the reasons that, you know, I feel so good about what you have entitled this program, Jane.
Mhm.
And, you know, I feel honored to be here. And I feel like all of you who are here with us today, I want to acknowledge you for having the value of wanting to be an active learner throughout your life, and that you're here for that reason, and you're curious and you're open to learning new things. So welcome.
Jane, I'm just a little bit preoccupied because I don't see Charlie and Linda on the screen. And I'm wondering, it's a tech question, if that matters. I think maybe the guests who are listening to us can see us, but I'm not seeing us.
Oh, because we certainly see you.
Oh, okay, then it's
Yeah,
fine.
we see you, and perhaps Mary can figure it out. I think it has to do with the view. But you know, while you're talking, I don't usually do this, but maybe I can ask you a question. And I'm going to read what's down here in my writing here. In your work, have you found that certain personality types or styles are more prone to conflict in relationships? And if so, how can they manage that?
You know, I wouldn't say that there are people who have a certain personality type who are more prone. There may be extroverts who are more expressive. You know, they communicate more than introverts, tend to be more internal. They may exhibit their anger and resentment more than people who are introverted. But that doesn't mean that the introverts are not suffering when they feel disconnected or misunderstood. They just might not show it as much. And whether you're introverted or you're extroverted, no matter what your personality type, we are all challenged to not let the unfinished business lay around unattended to, because it tends to mount up and it can come down, on you like an avalanche coming down the side of the mountain and bury you in trouble. And so when we teach our classes, when we see people in counseling, are always appealing to them, don't go the way of the conflict phobic people. If you feel reluctant to bring up the tough issues, reach your skill level where you can bring it up in a responsible way, not an accusatory or a blamey way, where you can invite the other person to join you, to listen, and don't say you did this and you didn't do that and you said this and you didn't say that. That will get things off on a really bad foot. To really talk about yourself, about your own feelings and needs. If you felt hurt, if you felt frightened, if you felt disconnected, if you felt lonely, to be willing to share, particularly from your deeper, vulnerable feelings that are always underneath the anger and the irritation. And sometimes people are so preoccupied with their irritability that they don't take that breath to drop down to their heart where they're feeling those tender feelings. And it really does take a lot of courage to expose them. But what we have found in our many years of doing this work, that's what great relationships are made of. That the couple or the parent-child or the friend, they have created a safety, security context with which they can be real with each other. So this emotional intimacy that comes from speaking about our feelings and needs can head off a lot of trouble at the pass. When we really feel connected, when we really feel seen and heard and loved and valued and respected, a lot of the things that used to upset us don't upset us anymore because we have put in that solid context of respect and care.
Mhm.
I can ask you more questions, or if you can talk what you'd like to.
Bring them on. I love
Okay.
the questions.
I'll ask you some, but please, everybody in the audience, if you don't ask your questions, you won't get them answered. So, there are certainly verbal, verbal things in an argument, but what about the nonverbal? Where people they'll go, or make faces, or so that's what I want to know. Are there specific gestures or body language cues that can help de-escalate an argument?
Mm.
I mean, as I said, there are, like, or whatever. Do you notice anything?
Mm. Yeah, I know so many of us are really attuned to picking up nonverbal cues from other people because we're creatures of habit, and we want to make sure that we understand what it is that what effect our communication is having on the other person. And so using words seems to be generally the best way of finding that out. If we're not getting verbal information from the other person, if we're not getting the message that, oh, I understand what you're saying, or I don't agree with this, or I'm confused about it. If we're not getting verbal information, then the only thing we can do is make the assumption that what we're thinking or feeling or picking up from the other person must be what they're experiencing. And so it's natural to seek out more information because we want to know what impact is my communication having on this person. And what we'll do is we will make the assumption that what I think they're feeling based on their nonverbal body language must be what they're feeling. And if I interpret a gesture or a raised eyebrow or something that I associate with a certain emotion, I'll make that assumption. And what we encourage people to do is when they're not sure what somebody is feeling, is rather than filling in the blank with an interpretation that may or may not be true, we encourage them just to try to find out. What's the best way to find out? Just ask them. Just say, what do you think about what I just said? Or what did you hear me say? Asking them to paraphrase it, which is a very useful tool that can head off a potential conflict. Because then we have a chance to correct them if their interpretation is inaccurate. And we have a chance to let them know that, yeah, thank you, that's exactly what I meant. So, yeah, about 85%, depending upon which study you look at, of our information that we get in interacting with people is nonverbal. The verbal part is just the tip of the iceberg. We can tell a lot more, but the verbal part of it is important because it helps us to either confirm or challenge the assumptions that we're making. And, to have a great relationship, you've got to be able to attune yourself to the other person's world. You've got to be able to really understand where they're coming from, what they're experiencing. Because if you don't have a clear understanding of that, you're just going to make it up. You're just going to decide, well, this is what they're thinking. This is what they're feeling. So we really encourage honest feedback to the other person. And we could talk a little bit about what feedback is and what it isn't, because a lot of people have a misunderstanding of what that term really means.
Yeah, please do.
Well, it's talking about your experience and it's judgment-free. Do you know, sometimes people think they're giving feedback, but they're giving opinions, which are often judgmental. If we're really giving feedback, we're just talking about our response, our feeling response to what just happened. And it's important, not just the words, but the tone of voice. And I appreciate your question about the non-verbal part of the communication. To be a super communicator, you need to communicate not just with the words, but also with the intention and with the tone in your voice. So a lot of people are very sensitive to tone in the voice. If it's got a sharp edge on it, they want to protect themselves. Also to face each other, to look each other in the eye, to use the profound communication of touch, turning towards each other indicates to the other person that you're really there with them, that you're connected with them, that you're deeply listening with an intention to understand them. And that makes such a difference. It gives you the advantage of being received.
I want to just add a very brief, another one-liner to your repertoire, those of you who are viewing this, of tools that might be useful to know and to use in a relationship. And that's the saying, some of you may have heard this before, that people don't really care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so many of us are so quick to jump in to the conversation, communicating to the other person how brilliant we are, how smart we are, how much we know, giving them advice, giving them our opinion about things, but we haven't even engaged them yet. They're still not really connecting to us because they still don't know why we're telling them this. And sometimes it's very obvious, oh, I know, you want to impress me with your accomplishments. Well, you know what? If that's where you're coming from, the other person is probably going to sense that, and it's probably not going to impress them in a positive way. So how do we let them know how much we care? We focus our attention on them. We listen to them. We don't make them wrong. We express curiosity rather than judgment. We give them our full attention when they're talking. And that is a huge factor in terms of engaging people with openness, so that they're really open to hearing what they want to hear what we're saying, because we've already communicated to them that we care about them. We care about them more than we care about how big an impression we're making on them.
So one of the secrets of great relationship that we have arrived at is don't give unsolicited advice. And even when it's solicited, be careful. And you had mentioned to me when we were planning in the beginning this session, you said there are going to be a lot of people who are retired and they're in the senior age group. And some of these people have friction with their kids, maybe with grandkids too, but sometimes it's hard to transition from being a parent when our children were small, where we did need to give them a lot of guidance. And when we have adult children, it's a fine art to learn how to be a parent of adult children, and you can make yourself really unpopular if you give too much unsolicited advice. They need to find their own way, and they may be making choices that we don't approve of, we don't agree with. And if they ask our opinion, that's one thing, but we need to be careful about not being judgmental, because it can alienate them. And it can make them be closeted about what they're going through when they really could need us to give them some advice. And I share a press with Tina Gilbertson, who wrote this book about reconnecting with your estranged adult child. And it's being uncovered now by the people who are researching this, that there are large numbers of people who are not on speaking terms with their adult children, because there have been these incompletions, there have been hurts, there have been misunderstandings, there's been judgment and unsolicited advice given, and the child was hurt, then the parents were hurt when the child withdrew from the relationship, and maybe they don't come for Thanksgiving or Christmas, or maybe they don't call or visit as much, and there's a lot of pain all around. And what she says in the book, and I totally agree with this, is we need our kids more than they need us. They're going on with their careers and their lives, and their children. And for us to be super communicators, to be as loving and respectful and kind and caring as we possibly can be in our relationship with them, tends to heal some of the disconnect, the missed conversations. And so it is an art form to learn to be a super communicator. In terms of arguing, there's a lot of people who believe that arguing is a good thing. We're not necessarily in that camp. We think that you can have a heated, animated, passionate debate about the way you see things, but don't go over that line to coerce the other person to change their mind about how they view things, or to change their behavior, because that sets us up as high and mighty authority on the subject, and I'm right and you're wrong. And that is a setup for disconnection. whether it's a romantic partnership, our children, our grandchildren, people that we work with, our neighbors or friends, to be very careful that we don't go over that line. And if we go over it, if we mess up, fess up right away, take responsibility for it, and then become a champion of repair. I'm sorry, I overstepped my boundaries. I was afraid in that moment, or I was hurt by something that you said. And I want to put a correction in. And it's good rule of thumb to have an agreement with everybody who's you're close to that you can repair, that you can do a do-over, and then have another go at it wiser than before.
So is could you talk more about as you say in the book, is it really possible to avoid the arguments? I mean, we come to our spouse, our friend, and we say, you shouldn't do that or whatever. What do we do? How can we stop it to avoid the argument?
It's really hard
hard.
to stop it. In fact, I'd say for most of us, until we really have engaged in some of the practices that can neutralize the habit of giving advice when we disagree, it's almost impossible. But with practice, when we see that there is a way that we can interrupt that impulse, even if we don't catch it until after we've already said the wrong thing, and we can become more attuned to how the other person responds when we make them wrong, when we correct them, when we tell them what they should do, when we give them our judgment about what they just did. When we begin to see that, and we begin to see the effect that it has on our relationship, then we have more motivation to view our habit of judging them and advising them, giving our opinion, telling them what they should think, feel, or do. When we really have that motivation, then it becomes easier, not easy, but easier to resist that impulse. Because sometimes it's really obvious how misguided they are. It's really obvious how wrong they are. It's really obvious the way, to us anyway, it's obvious, the way we think they should respond to this situation, what we think they should do, think, say, or feel. So the first step is to recognize that it just isn't helpful to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then to see, well, when I'm feeling that way, what is it that I can do that maybe isn't going to take this relationship down a slippery slope?
And to replace our judgments with more questions. Because sometimes the person that we want so much to see the error of their ways may have an inkling that they didn't handle it very well. And just the question, are you satisfied with how you handled that, can lead them to believe that there is a way to tweak it where it could be better. And Duhigg just came out with a book a few months ago called Super Communicators. And he thinks that the most fabulous thing that you can do to be a super communicator is to ask more questions and to really show up and pay attention after you offer the question, to be a recipient of their inquiry into themselves. I will be grateful all my days for a teaching that I received from Sylvia Boorstein when she talked about a spiritual practice that she calls talking meditation. It's just slowing down the rate with which we interchange our communication with the other person. Because if we slow down a little bit, we're less likely to issue our judgments and our pronouncements, sometimes downright demands and commands, which get us into trouble all the time. if we just can quiet down enough and center ourselves to be mindful, we'll remember to ask more questions designed to show our care and interest in the other person, where they may find their own internal truth that way.
Yeah, good. Thank you. So a question from the audience is, what happens when a spouse believes you should know what he means, even when his word choice can be very confusing? So it's expectations. He thinks, oh, you should know. You're married to me. I know. What do you say to that?
Well, good at coming up with sayings, most of which are not mine. I just stole them from other people. But in this case, well, there's a couple of things that come up. First of all, don't believe everything you think. Don't believe everything you think. You might think that this person should know, and that there's a problem because they don't know, and they need to be reminded that they are wrong. So reminding people that they're wrong generally doesn't
Not good.
promote more trust and respect in the relationship. It's also a good idea not to give advice to somebody unless they have requested it. Usually if somebody says something and we believe we know what they should do, it's very hard to resist the temptation to communicate to them a statement that starts with the words, you should. Here's what you should do. You should know this. You should take this action. The implication there is that anybody with half a brain would know it, but I have to tell you because you're kind of slow. So there's an implicit judgment whenever we tell somebody what they should do, what they should know, how they should handle this situation. The judgment is, I know better than you do. And you're lucky to have me in your life because I can straighten you out.
Americans there.
But it's not easy to withhold your opinion and your advice when you're 100% convinced that you're right.
I want to add to what Charlie's saying. I'm thinking about Joanna Macy when she married her husband, Fran. The clergy performing the ceremony blessed them and said, throughout your marriage, may you always be surprised.
That's lovely.
Yes, that they would be on the edge of discovery. They wouldn't put their marriage on cruise control. They wouldn't assume that they knew everything about each other, that they would presence curiosity and wonder. In fact, the research is really clear about these couples who have been together with decades, 50 years and more like us, who are still have the romantic spark really alive. They ask these couples when they interview them, how did you keep romance alive after all this time? They all say, it's change, it's novelty, it's adventure. We're always learning, we're always growing, we're always trying new things. And so that person whose spouse said, you should know me by now, they may not have that grounded in them, how vital and alive you are, what vitality it gives to the relationship to be on that learning and growing edge, that they may not want to actually get vulnerable to expose some of the tender feelings and needs, so that they might be ducking responsibility. So we always invite people, lean into that challenge. Don't assume that the other person knows. Don't assume that you're known by them. Keep looking for the layers under the layers under the layers, because there's a lot there. And a lot of it's been hidden away in the shadows, that it's a little scary. It's a cultivated taste to be a deep diver and go into the deep inner workings of each other. But I think it's the best game in town.
Well, I'm just, what does the spouse do, the one who is being told you should know? How should they respond? The one who's being told you should know? The,
Mhm. Oh, well, I mean, I've been on the receiving end of that and the giving end, both sides. So generally, when I get a response that, well, I should know, I just tell them, maybe I should, but I don't. I don't know. There's a lot of things I don't know, and that's one of them. Can you forgive me for not knowing?
Ah.
It's okay with you that I don't know.
I also want to call
Oh,
attention
yeah, go
to,
ahead.
it's a romantic myth to think that just because they love us so much that they should read our mind. And we wrote a book about the myths, the romantic myths. We're trying to blow up some of the myths. And one of the ones that I suffered with for a long time in the early part of our relationship is if he really loved me, he'd know what I needed and I wouldn't have to ask for him. And I didn't realize that I was being irresponsible because I didn't want to get vulnerable and ask for how much touch and attention and you're beautiful and you're intelligent and all of this stuff that I was craving. I thought he didn't love me very much or else he would know. And then I realized that's a romantic myth. Was there more you wanted to say?
No,
Okay.
Okay, another question from the audience is, oh, what do you do if you're married to a person with a borderline personality disorder who thinks she, giving it away, she is always right, never does and says anything wrong?
well, the
What do you
first
do?
first thing I would do is I would try to find out whether she is open to accepting any efforts on my part to understand how it affects me. And I'd ask a question like, are you interested in finding out how it affects me when you say this, when you behave this way? Because I'm not going to tell you all this stuff if I don't really trust that you're valuing my truth enough to really take it seriously. So I'm going to, before I say a word, I just want to find out whether you care enough to really be open to hearing and accepting my experience about this. So that's kind of a trick question because, most people, even if they didn't agree that they wanted to, would say, of course I do, of course I do. And then I would proceed to tell them, this is how I feel when you behave that way. This is how I feel when you say those things. And then I would be very observant to how they respond to what I'm saying. If this person really does have a personality disorder, then in all likelihood, they would get very defensive, perhaps very angry, perhaps hostile, and they would demonstrate in a moment that they're really not open, that they don't care how it affects me because they're not even letting me finish telling them what I'm experiencing. So, at that point, my options are pretty limited. I can keep trying to get them to hear me, but 9 times out of 10, those efforts are going to make things worse.
Okay, thank you. Another question from the audience is, she says, if I can get a grip on my knee jerk, she needs advice by slowing down and being more patient and kind. It feels satisfactory, but voicing my opinion is my way of feeling empowered and less insecure. I expect someone to say, you're right. And when they do, that person's happy.
Yep.
So I
Okay.
think it would be helpful to be more self-referential, to give acknowledgement to herself rather than cruising from approval. it's extra. If they say, I agree with you, you're right, I see it that way too, that would be extra. But to give ourselves some respect that our opinion is a valid one, that we've thought it through, and that it wasn't some impulsive, thing that we just landed on quickly, and to, as much as possible, release from the approval from the outside to get it from within. And that first part of the question was a little bit different. And that's about the pause to reflect before we say anything.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just needs a breath. The chapter in the book, the End to Arguing book, says it's the most underutilized tool in the toolbox, this pause to reflect. And at any moment before we start the conversation, if this conversation starts to get heated in the middle or towards the end, there always is a place where when we see that we're getting riled up, they're not agreeing with me, I'm being triggered right now, I want to fight them or I want to run away, that you calm yourself down enough to take a few breaths. Maybe you need to go into another room if it's really overheated. Maybe it's going to take more than just a few breaths, but that you get yourself centered, because if only the reptilian brain is working, that primitive part, it only knows fight, flight, and freeze. We need to be calmer so that the neocortex, which sees lots of possibilities, is engaged. And then we can have a different kind of a conversation where maybe she would speak out loud. Well, this is how I see it, and I've really thought about it, and it's true for me. It's true in my experience. Maybe you see it a little differently. How do you see it? But it's okay to respectfully disagree. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, and they can be divergent.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, please connect this to what is occurring in families regarding politics today.
Sometimes it can't be connected. Sometimes people get so polarized and so attached to their position and so hostile against any other point of view that there's really no point in even having the conversation. And I'm not saying this is always the case, but sometimes when you make the assessment that this person is so locked in that there's no openness to even reconsidering what they've decided, best to avoid those conversations.
And if we do enter into a conversation, to avoid being judgmental, because they can have the attitude of, how could you be so stupid to be for that candidate? Do you know? And that is going to really be divisive in the relationship. If there is any discussion, and I'm totally with Charlie, some of the people in our family, it isn't safe to have a discussion about politics, religion. There are a few topics that we must avoid. But if we have a conversation, and the people who are, a little bit open-minded, to bring that curiosity and wonder, to just try to understand why it is that they have the views that they have.
Yeah.
Not to agree, not to change their mind, definitely not to make them wrong for having them, but to understand. It's so powerful to have communication with people where you just want to understand. That's big.
So an example of what that might sound like is to ask more, like Linda said earlier, ask more questions rather than give more statements. So one question that you might want to ask the person is, I'm really curious to hear how you came to that conclusion. Can you tell me something about how you decided to come down on that point of view that you've got? To express some curiosity, some interest, to rather than trying to get them to see things the way you do, to try to find out more about you. I really want to, I'm really interested in how you came to that conclusion. Would you be willing to tell me something about that process for you?
It's a good rule of thumb to give what we want to receive.
Yes.
And we would like them to be open to our point of view, we need to take the leadership role and presence that first. And after they've had a chance to convey to us how they arrived at the decision that they made to vote for that candidate, maybe they would have a little opening to hear how we differ from their view. And that can be a enlivening conversation where people don't feel that it's divisive. They can feel connected because they feel respected.
Yes. I just want to ask you, where can people get this? Where can people buy your book?
Amazon. It's one click away on
It's
Amazon.
available a lot of other places too, but Amazon is one place where you can get it. Most independent bookstores carry it. Barnes and Noble does, but probably most of the people who purchase it through Amazon.
And we like to support local bookstores. And if you call your local bookstore or you visit your local bookstore and they don't have it right now, they can usually have it in a few days.
You can also recommend that your library carry it too. You can make a request to your library.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I used, I know that you give workshops. Can you just tell us where your next kind of workshop, where they will be, where they are, the workshops?
Coming from New England to Massachusetts, we're going to be at Kripalu, which is in Lenox, Mass. That's across the street from Tanglewood, where they have the fabulous music festival in the summertime. It's a wonderful place. It's the last weekend in October. We're teaching love, sex, and intimacy there, and the food is terrific at Kripalu. And they have yoga all day, 3 times a day. And for the yoga practitioners, it's just yoga heaven there. We also teach on the West Coast in Big Sur, California at Esalen Institute. We'll be there Valentine's weekend. And the weekend before Valentine's, we'll be back at Kripalu for the New England folks.
And your website, in case people want to get in touch with you.
Is Bloomwork. BLOOMWORK.com. And we got all kind of free things on our website. We've got a link that'll take them to YouTube and they can see videos of us teaching. It's got our courses on it. There are over 600 blogs that we posted on Psychology Today. And also we have free ebooks for people there.
Great. I'm going to ask just one quick question that came in. Someone from the audience said about his wife. She refused to go to counseling because she would say, "Oh, I wish I had asked this question. I guess go to counseling." I'm trying to figure out the question. She refused to go because if I asked her, I guess she would say if we went, we would get divorced. And he says she was right. 2 different counselors came to the same conclusion. You cannot be happily married to a person with BPD, he's saying. And that's what is the personality disorder. Isn't that the?
Yeah. Well, I think anybody who gets involved with counseling is brave and they're taking a risk. For sure, they're going to find out things that they haven't been fully aware of. And some of those things might be painful and might cause anxiety and distress. Some of them may also liberate them in ways that enable them to have a profoundly improved relationship. But I'm not going to kid anybody. It's a risk to get into any kind of therapeutic assistance because there are things that you have not been allowing yourself to recognize that will probably come up in the process.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I thank you, by the way, for somebody's just going to say what I was going to say. this person from the audience says, no question, but letting them know their suggestions are fantastic. And this person says, I practice writing in my daily journal like a dialogue with both sides of my brains. And she says, or he, it works wonders.
Hmm.
So, yes, you gave such a really wonderful ideas, and there's more in your book. And it was great. So, but while I have everybody looking ahead, on Wednesday, October 23rd, the Secretary of State, Greg Moore, will be here, and he's going to talk about the integrity of the election, including key dates and reminders for voters, as well as an overview of elections administration. And this is, people say this is one of the most important elections, so please try not to miss it. And thank you all for sharing part of the day with us. And again, Linda and Charles, thank you so much for being our guest today. So goodbye, everyone, and we'll see you next time, Wednesday, October 23rd. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.